Hello and welcome to Section 8, Part 17. In the previous part, we just implemented our entities marker interface on our entities component so we can start implementing the marker setup for each entity. Now I got to the create marker thing, and in the RTS demo marker project that I did, I had a data asset for marker, and I was weighing up whether I wanted to do the asset for an actual individual marker or just put everything in our entity data like we've been putting some settings anyway. But I think it's well worth making a data asset for a marker, and the reason for that is you put all the data in a single package and you can pass it around, but also if you create a marker you've got all the settings there and it's reusable if you need to reuse it in different places. So we might have a marker type for a normal infantryman, we might have an anti-air unit that will have a different icon, or a tank or something like that, and we can have an asset for each of those things and then just assign that marker to whatever it requires. So when you go to create an entity, you don't have to assign 4 textures because they're the infantryman and they've got to have all these textures, this Niagara effect, this image, this, that. So it'll just be all in a package, marker data. So we're going to create the marker data first. I'm just going to create this as a normal U asset because I think this is something that will load every time. Doesn't really need to be a primary data asset. And yeah, it's in data. So a normal data asset is loaded into memory at the start of the startup of the game, so you don't have to do that like we've been doing with the primary data asset, preload it or load it. But what we can do is still have the textures in here as soft object pointers. So when it does load the data asset, it's not loading everything in the data asset. We still do like a load synchronous, or if we want to preload it, we can. But I might just come to the entity data asset, copy one of these headers. We don't need the data type set up because it's the primary data asset. We need to put in some textures. Effect, sorry. We want Niagara system, and that's going to include the Niagara system.h. We're going to have a series of these for the effects of the marker. So there'll be one for selection. So we'll call it Niagara system selection. And then will be one for destination and one for, what's the other one? Preview. And then we're going to have the same sort of setup, but it's going to be a material instance. We'll just call it material. And this will be material instance. In the other project, I've got marker height and marker size. I think I might put that on the entity. We will have a bit of a mix, but it makes more sense to set the size and the offset based on what the entity is. Could be a large entity or a small one, so the size is going to be entity based. So we'll just call this marker size. And then the other one we'll have a height offset. So make it marker height offset. I'll give these some defaults. So I'll give it 150 and 150. And then in here we need to have a reference to our marker data that's assigned to this entity. Put that up here. And then back on our marker data, we want to have some validation of, we want to know if this is valid. So we're going to create a function for just return bool const. And here we're actually going to just load the required assets so that and then check if it's valid. So we're going to do, we can do return. So that'll return, oh sorry, it's got to be like that. So that'll return if they load successfully. And then we'll just repeat those down. And this will be destination. So it sort of kills two birds with one stone, and it can be const. I'm not sure if it would want to let me be const because we're technically loading, but it's const thing it seems. So yeah, when we go to use them, we can say, do we have one? And if it returns false, so we know it's not done, and also it does the loading for us. So that's all good. That is our data, and we'll need to remember to create these, or at least one, when we get into the editor. So now what we want is a function on here to get the marker data. I think I'll put it up here. We'll do a forward deck for this, and then get marker data. Now we have to check if we have entity data because it's inside the entity data. So copy this. So if we have a valid entity data, we should be able to just return data. Actually, we'll check if it's valid. Oh, it's just going to return null anyway. Yeah, that should be fine. We'll just return data.marker data. Okay, so we're going to cast it to our type, which is this. Include that H in the CPP file, and then if none of that's good, we'll return null pointer. Marker data. So now I might just copy this line. No, that's category. Oh, it doesn't matter. That's because that's the first thing we want to do in create marker is we want to see if we've got marker data. We want to get an array of all the marker types. So we're going to use our template that we made. And what do we call it? It was the RTS entity marker type. So that'll give us an array of all the types. And then for each type, we want to see if we have the data to make the marker. We'll just switch on the marker type. For selection, okay, that's why I wasn't coming up. I haven't given it a public header here, so not telling getters and things. So it's all public. Sort that out. And what I'm going to do here is if the this is just going to break out of the loop, so it will go on to the next marker. So we're just going to say continue, and we'll do the same for each one. And now for each marker, we want to create the marker component. So we're going to need a name for that. And we're going to grab that from the enum. So that'll give us the name of the marker, and then we want to put that on a string for our component name. Right, it's meant to be quotes. And we're going to underscore %s for a string. So all our components will be marker component, and then whatever the name, whatever type of marker it is, so selection, destination, or preview. All right, now we need to create a marker. So marker component, marker component. All right, so now our marker is successfully created. We want to attach it to the root component of this. We're going to attach it to the owner of this component, which will be our entity. Actually, we'll make it get owner, get root component, attached to that, attached to component. And then we just need an attachment rule and transform rules, keep relative. Now we want to set some of our settings, so we want to tell it which marker it is. So we're going to do that marker type function. We're going to pass in the marker type. And then we want to register the component. If you're adding this to, you're not doing it on an entity component, you're doing it on a character and you want to show up in blueprints, there's a function called add instance component. Just pass in the component itself and that'll should sort out any display things in blueprints. But because we're adding it to a component here, we're not going to do that, have access to that. And then the last switch is we are just going to assign a reference to our component. So we want to basically want to do the same as this. Let's just copy this. And then rather than do these checks, we just want to, I can't remember if I think we've created. Yep, I'm going to do that here. So we're going to have references to our components here. So U property. And again, if you're doing this on a character and you want to be able to view the component, make sure you have blueprint, read, write, edit anywhere in here, or whatever access you want to grant. There you go, and so we'll just assign those. Oops. There we go. So that's our component created onto these getter functions. So I'm just going to come back up to here. We're going to need this for each one. And I'm going to, even though we're doing that load already, I'm just going to do load synchronous here because it won't load twice. And turn a little pointer if something's wrong. And this is going to be our material selection. There we go. And for these ones, we've got a bit of a mixed bag. So entity data. Oh, these are all entity data. So we can copy. What's that entity data? Yeah. We've got marker size, marker height. I think it was marker height offset or something like that. Min marker distance. I have to change the name. naming convention there for that one. Oh well. Marker trace channel. Now, set selected is going to be how we talk to the selection component when our entity gets selected. So we're going to, first of all, just check the component's valid. And then we're going to tell it you're selected. And update previews pretty similar. It'll be a preview marker. Actually, I think it's called update preview and pass on preview state. Location is going to depend on the type of marker. So we are going to do another switch for the type, which is getting passed in here. The reason why I replace that no marker with default is if you ever add a new marker type and forget to implement it here, it'll just execute through the default and won't error. Still won't work how you want, but at least it won't crash. So for our selection marker, we want to update the location. Basically want to do the same for the others. We just need to know what type it is so we can access our reference. So the destination. Right, I think that's good. So we want to now call this set selected when we're selecting an entity. We come back to our select here. We've got this select function, and this select function, well, it's still in a delegate here, but that doesn't really matter to us right now. But if you have a look at the usage of this, it brings us back to our player controller, and it's handling this client side just to do the visualization of the selection. So selection is only happening client side, it's not a server thing, and that's what we want. So when this selection comes in, we can do set selected and pass the select state, and that'll go to our component and do the selection. Back on our, not on our player controller, let's close that. Back on our player controller command, we've got our preview timer. It's generating the navigation data. So when our navigation is finished processing, we're previewing the navigation, passing it to our entity component for each entity that's involved in that. So here is where we need to add our check for our preview marker component. And if that's valid, we want to update preview, show preview with the entity position destination. So that's the entity's position. Now, if that's a blank entity position data, then this position will be 0, 0, 0. And in our update preview, we're checking, basically we're disabling the preview location. We're disabling the preview if the position is 0. That's how that works. And then for our destination markers, we want to control that back in our AI controller. So we're going to come back to our AI controller command. Execute navigation, right? Put it in here. So we've got we've got it to do here. So we've found which entity it is. We've extracted the entity's position data, and now we can, we have a valid reference to the entity component. So all we need to do for the destination marker is update the location. So entity component, what was it? What's the function called? Was update update location. I might change that actually. A bit confusing. I'm going to add marker to this name, these functions. may have to change. If it didn't automatically change, you'll have to change them on the interface as well. But yeah, Control RR to rename will should rename it everywhere, even if you've implemented it in other areas. So now we can do here that, and our position will be the destination, and it wants to know which marker type, and we want to update the destination marker. Is this not? Yeah, okay, so this is not public. So I'm gonna pull this one out, put it up here. And so I don't get confused, I'm gonna move this up. Put it above this one. I'm looking at it in the CPP, I will be able to find it. There we go. So now when that execute navigation comes through and we get a destination, it'll go through the update marker. It'll go, it's a destination type, so it'll go to update location on the destination marker. It'll set its new location and it'll set its visibility based on whether it's selected or not. So that's those markers done. We should be right to move to the editor now to start creating our assets. Before I attempt to build, I'm going to this missing bracket here, and I'm going to build. So I've got this warning here. I can show you how to get rid of that, even though it's only a warning. So we need to list it as a plugin here. I'm just going to copy this, add a new entry. That'll get rid of that warning. We've got some errors here. Group data. I didn't even edit this video, but we've done something. Oh, there's just the missing reference, let's say. Rename this to terrain location. Yep, it was conflicting with another location somewhere. Not sure where. See what that fixes. Yep, cool. Righto, so in the editor, let's start with, we'll come into entities, materials, and create a new material. Call it marker material. I'll just marker will do, and marker. We'll set the blend mode to translucent and unlit. Just like in the demo video, I'm going to use a material function from the Unreal UI Labs project. If you just go on to Fab and search for, on the labs, search for Fab and search for UI Labs, you'll see this is it here. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm going to grab something that does wedges and it's good for making a circle. So if you're not making a circle icon, you might not need to do this. So now I've got the UI Labs project open. I've just gone into Content, UI Labs, Material Functions, Masks, and I'm going to migrate this wedges mask. Could bring them all over, but if you're not using them, it's not much point. I'm going to put that into the entities content directory, and that'll import into there. And now in our content directory, we should have this UI Material Labs. And I'll bring this to here. Now I'm skipping over that a bit fast, but if you really want the detail, I'll go to my other series on that, where I'll go into more detail on how to do this. And we're going to connect this straight up to opacity. You can see it's doing its wedges. Now let's set up a color. 3 and click, M and click, S and click. Not doing anything different to what I've done in that other tutorial, so you've already got that. All this material, you can copy it over. So for this will be what makes up the shape, so we can have some options on this. So we're going to have dotted line, and we're just going to use a 0, 1 value to make it a dotted line. So it'll be instead of a straight circle, it'll be a dotted circle. So now we want to, and you can see the way that that gets the dotted line is by those wedges, but by masking those out. But now we want to, so if A is greater than B, as in this is 1 and B is something less than 1, then we want to use the dotted line. Otherwise, we're going to use this radial gradient setup, which is 2 radial gradients, so it creates a thin line, and we subtract from each one. And that'll be the if A is less than B. And that should be 1, always make a mistake. And then we'll do our densities. So we have max density. See, that's giving us our line. And then if we add a radius, this needs to be 1, that's why it's coming up as grayed out. In my series on the markers, I actually add a pulse to this. If you want a pulsing function added in here, just go check out that video. I think it's video 2 where I do the material. Actually, might be video 1. And it'll add a pulse option like we've got the dotted line here, turn off and on. But this will do for us here. Let's save that. We'll come back to, I might come back just to the content directory, create folder, VFX. I'm going to create a new Niagara system. I think we want to do an emitter one. I haven't seen this menu before, it's changed. We're looking for this simple bright burst, there it is. And we'll call this Niagara system marker. So in the marker properties, turn on fixed bounds, and we'll go into the CPU and change it to GPU. So down to emitter update, inactive response is, there we go, and change it to kill emitter, emitter update infinite, and then 0.1 for the loop duration. And then on initialize particle, lifetime also to 1. We need to set some user parameters. Just add a bit. There we go. Add float for, I'm going to call it marker size. This sprite size. And assign that. Drag this. There we go. System update, you can change that to 1. Now we're going to come to local modules. Actually, we'll create the user parameters first. So create float for the height off the terrain. And we'll need a vector. This will be the position. I'll use a marker position. And then another vector. And this will be marker facing. And then one for material instance. And we'll set that by default to our material, marker material. We'll do an instance of that, so we'll come back to materials, create instance. And we'll add that. Alright, save that there. Go to local modules here. These windows are in window if you need them. So this module we want to add is something that can align it to our landscape. So we're just going to call it align landscape. So we need to add our inputs. So we want to add our facing. That's not the one. What do we call it? Marker. Oh yeah, sorry. This just needs to be a vector. Yeah, input. And then we can call it facing. That'll be our input that we just set up. And then we'll have a vector. That'll be our position. And then a float, which will be our height. Now on our map set here, we're going to have the actual sprite facing. So that is the facing, and it's the sprite facing. And then we want the position, which is the particles position. And so the facing is just going to go straight in, and then the position is what we're going to modify to adjust for the landscape. We're going to break this, and we can just do a convert. And let me open these pins. I think I just need to add them individually. Actually, can I drag this in? Can. There we go. And then the output is going to be a vector. So we want a vector to position. And if we drag this onto here, it should set the type automatically for us. And that's going to be our position. Internally here though, actually break this because we need to change that one. But the X is just going to go to X, Y is just going to go to Y. Well, Z is just going to go to Z, to be honest. But here we're going to add our height. So just do plus add. And we want to add the height, offset height to the Z. And feed that back in. So that gives us our height off the terrain. That should be good. So now back in our system overview here, we can bring our align landscape into particle spawn. And we should have our inputs here, which we can now assign to our user markers. So the facing, marker height offset, and position. And that didn't drag. Yeah. So it's feeding those variables that we're going to pass in directly into that module. So now that does it on the particle spawn, and now we just need to do it for the particle update. So again, put it in here and reassign those parameters. So height, facing, position, and then on the sprite renderer, so let's set this to our marker and our facing mode to custom facing vector. So that'll allow to use that facing value that we're setting in our module. And we'll set the marker, the user parameter to marker material. So if we did want to change it at runtime, we could. Right, should be able to save that, make sure our material is saved. And now we need to come back to framework, data, and might create a new folder in here, call it markers. I'm going to create a new data asset. It's going to be your marker. And I'm going to call this one DA marker, and I'm going to call this one default. It's going to be our marker system. I'm just going to put these all to the same marker, and the material, marker. Like so. And this is just like if you did have different effects for different markers and also different materials, you can mix and match. I'm using the single material that can do multiple things, so I'll be setting it up in code, but that's what it's built for, to have more options. So that's our default marker. Now if we come back to our entity data, we should have min marker distance. looks like it's 0, so I'm just going to set that to 250, and I'm going to set the marker data to, oh, I didn't filter this, doesn't matter. We'll set that to our default marker. So, let's see if we get anything. I think that's the old decal one, I haven't turned it off. So we need to turn off our debug stuff, I think, because this should be a preview. That's not working well, looks. Yeah. So back in our C++, I think the selection one was done on the component actually. We come in here, there's a on selection change delegate, and it's doing the marker stuff here. I'm just going to take this out, and then I need to take out our debug, which I think was in the preview on the controller. Debug destination, shall leave that tagged. I'll just take this out. So I might relaunch for that. Oh, it wasn't destination, was it? That was in the preview. Yeah, here it is. I'll just roll that out. So the other thing that occurred to me is the names we used on the, it's in the marker here, this here. So we come back to our VFX. I prefix everything with marker here, so I don't think I did that in the naming in the code. That's got to match up, so this will have to be marker position, marker facing. And then while we're here, we need to add the, I don't think we're doing it anywhere else. We need to add that height offset, so we can change this to a float parameter. And we want to set our marker, what was it? Marker height offset. And it's going to be a variable for that. I think we did. We didn't. Looks like we're missing some initialization here. So let's do that. I think the other one is the trace channel, maybe. Will do. Oh, when we set the marker data, we'll need to pass in the offset height. Let's add that. Oh, we're not actually setting the data, so we missed that step altogether. This is where we could, now that we've got the marker data, we could just pass the whole data, but I think most of the settings are coming from the entity anyway. So we were getting that through these getter functions. So the last one will be the height, and we need the trace channel and the min marker distance. So I meant to return a float. That was a mistake. Better return that. And this default will be visibility, I guess. It's just, this is erroring because it's part of the interface. Saying that doesn't match. There we go. That should be good now. If we come back. Back. So that's our data set. And now that the data is set, we can use it here. Oh, hang on, we haven't set the size, which is also got a bit passed in. So you can see why you might put this in a struct. It gets a bit long. Make it in marker size. Do another one of these. Marker size. And yeah. Bring this down a line. And where were we calling that? Was in here, wasn't it? No. There's our component. Go on our marker now. We can set that in the update as well. It's called marker size, I believe. Marker size, yep. So that's good. Now the last thing we need to do is make our material dynamic so we can talk to that. Oh, hang on, we'll add these initializations. Yep, the default was 150, I think. The height offset. Get overridden anyway. Okay, so now to initialize this, we're going to use the onRegister. Completely forgot to fill out entirely, but it makes sense to do it now anyway. But given this recording's getting on a bit, we're going to end this part here, and then I'll release another video this week to really get through the rest of this marker component. We'll just finalize this register part, and we're just got to do, we actually haven't called the create markers section yet, so we've got to figure out how to do that on the client. See you in the next part.